In this video, I'll be giving some advice for young jazz musicians. It's Paul Toby here from jazzmental.com. Thanks for joining me. If you're a young jazz musician just starting out, or if you've been in jazz for a while, I think you're going to want to learn and pay attention to many of the things that I'm going to talk about here. As someone who made his living as a professional touring jazz recording artist for many years, I've got some great advice for you based on my experience, and there are some things that you're going to want to know. And by the time you finish this video, you'll have a pretty clear understanding of exactly what you need to do to be successful. Let's get started. Okay, so today we're talking about advice for young jazz musicians. Now, it doesn't really matter what instrument you're playing, doesn't really matter what your current level is. If you're thinking in your mind, hey, I want to give this jazz thing a try, maybe become a professional musician, what's that all about? Do you have any advice for me? Well, as someone who made 8 albums and toured a bunch of countries and been nominated for Juno Awards, which is the highest award in my country, for music, I really have some solid advice that can help you. I've actually got 7 things that you're going to want to go through. Try to remember all of them and put them into practice immediately, because if you don't start practicing and changing your behaviors around these things, then maybe things won't change as much as you want them to. Okay, let's get started. Number 1, jazz is more than just theory and practicing. It's actually music. And I remember taking a lesson with Kenny Barron one time, and he said, hey, Paul, really what you need to do is start playing with your heart. And I think that's good advice. You need to understand that most people who aren't musicians can only connect with jazz if it actually sounds good to their ears. And many people aren't really used to jazz, so maybe the more musical it is, the better it is for the listener. Now, I totally get that there's playing outside and there's all these modern jazz things going on that you might want to dip into, and I get that. But at the end of the day, it's still music, and you have to make music. So you just intrinsically need to understand what that means. And for most people, it means, am I actually enjoying the sound that you're making? I think that's an important concept, because a lot of jazz musicians really get stuck in the theory and shedding all kinds of intricate lines and things like that. But at the end of the day, does it sound like music? So try to remember that. Number 2, in the business of music, especially jazz, you have to know what you want. And that's not easy to understand in the beginning. My wife, when we got married many years ago, said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, I want to be a professional jazz musician. Getting paid for a gig is being a professional. So I didn't really know at the time that I should have set my sights and the bar quite a bit higher. I did over time manage to do that, but not until later. So I probably could have skipped a lot if I just knew, hey, I want to be a recording artist, I want to make music, I want to tour and play concert halls, which is what I ended up doing, but it probably took a lot longer than it should have. Because in the beginning, I didn't really know what I exactly wanted. First of all, didn't think it was possible. So I think that's an important point. Know what you want, and you'll get a lot further, especially in music. All right, number 3, it might be too early for this, but you still need to know what makes you different. It's not about being better, and that's part of the challenge of jazz. You get surrounded by a bunch of technicians. They're really good at their craft. Hey, I can play the piano. You might want to check out some of the videos on this channel. I talk about how I perform and practice them and all of that, and it's very technical, and I get all of that. But at the end of the day, you need to know what makes your sound different. And if you want to be a recording artist, which is really, I think, in music, the ultimate goal, you've got to have your own sound. So you might want to start thinking about what that is. And it's not just the sound, but also what's the story behind it? Where did you come from? What's your story? And how does that resonate with people? At the end of the day, it's still entertainment. Even though it's a higher form of art, it's still entertaining. And your story and your ability to be different. When you listen to a great artist and you can recognize their sound immediately, that means that they've made their life's goal to be different than everybody else. So you can obviously listen to 2 bars of music, especially on a jazz radio station. If you can pick that person out immediately, you know that they've got a great career or had a great career. Okay, number 4, try not to worry that you're not good enough. I mentioned earlier that you tend to surround yourself with a bunch of great musicians and you're listening and you hear their skills, and sometimes it's depressing when you hear a great player. But most people can't tell the difference. So in the music business, it doesn't really matter if you're great or average. I've heard a lot of very suspect or average musicians make recordings. I hear them on the radio and I go, really? What were they thinking? But to most people, they don't hear that. They just hear the difference in sound. So again, in this, there's a bunch of people that might want to hold you back, maybe even your parents or other colleagues or whatever, saying, hey, are you crazy? You want to be a jazz musician? I mean, do you have any idea what you're in for? Yeah, it's tough. It's certainly not the easiest profession in the world, and it is difficult sometimes to make a living, but don't let naysayers hold you back. They don't really know what they're talking about. It's really more about them than about you. They're just trying to hold you back so they feel better about themselves because they can see that you're a great musician, but they don't like your prospects for making a career out of it. But they don't know what they're talking about. So just don't listen to that. I know it's not an easy thing to do, especially when it's coming from your parents, but like I said, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't have any idea what music is or what the music business is all about, unless of course they do. And then they'd probably be a lot more supportive than they are if they're actually musicians. Okay, number 5, yeah, you got to know your stuff. I would say focus on a lightning fast ability to play a lead sheet. If you can do that, if somebody stuck a lead sheet in front of you and it's got a melody and a bunch of chord symbols and you can solo over that instantaneously, that's where you need to put your focus because that will carry you a long way. That means that you're very versatile. You can get session gigs and you can be a great composer, maybe arranger, but also just an improviser. And there's a lot you can do with that. If you can just play notes off a page, that's not really going to serve you well. You kind of need to understand music from the inside out, and that means chords and scales and all that stuff. So if you're going to shed something, shed lead sheets and make sure that inside of that you've got your own sound going, like we mentioned previously. Okay, number 6, get as many live performances as you can. The real proving ground for musicians is live performance and getting out there and performing with other musicians, understanding the interplay, getting used to what the band sounds like from the stage, getting used to audiences, being somewhat entertaining, although most musicians have no idea what that means. I can definitely give you some advice in that area. If you want to make a comment below and say, hey, Paul, how do you entertain people? I can give you some really solid advice on how to do that. Because I think it's important not just to be able to perform, but to also talk to the audience, which again, most jazz musicians don't know the first thing about. It wasn't until much later in my career did I actually take some courses and try to figure that out, which I was quite successful at and played a lot of, great concerts where there's this interplay between me and the audience. If the audience is involved, it's a heck of a lot more fun for them than just sitting there and listening. So again, get a lot of live performances under your belt. That's really going to serve you well, especially with the whole concept of experience, because experience comes first. All right, so finally, here's number 7. This is the last point that I want to make. I was a professional for many years and understand the music business and understand jazz a lot better than most people. Certainly better than most jazz teachers in college, because I was out there performing and doing concerts and understood what that meant and how much practice was necessary and how to develop a sound and how to put recordings together, how to get some money together for a tour, that kind of stuff. I had a manager and just this whole concept of being a professional musician. And if you're, again, a young jazz musician and you're thinking, oh, is this for me? Is this something I want to explore? Then you're going to want number 7, which is to subscribe to this channel. I'm making 5 videos a week, not for my own benefit, for your benefit. It's not easy to make a living in jazz. If it were easy, everyone would do it. It is possible. I did it for many years. And so you're going to want to avoid some of the mistakes that I made. You're going to want to understand some of the wins that I had and how I did that. You're going to want to understand my approach to music. And I would just say, from me to you, if you want some advice and help on an ongoing basis, all you need to do is subscribe to this channel and also maybe hop over to jazzmental.com, see what we've got going on over there. And over the next few years, I just want to help mentor you, because you're not going to get that kind of advice and help and mentorship from really anybody else. I'm kind of in it for the pleasure of being able to help you. And that's my sole goal in this whole thing. So it's Paul Toby here. I hope you heard and understood what I was talking about. It's 7 very important things. And that's my advice for young jazz musicians. Get out there, get playing, and let's see how it goes. Good luck with it. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We're making 5 videos a week, just like this one, on various aspects of music and the music business. So I'd really appreciate it if you could come back and join me another time. Take care.